This is episode 14 with Caitlin McCall. Welcome to the Eco-Conscious Diver Show. I'm your host, Caitlin, PADI scuba instructor, scientific diver, and science communications specialist. I'm here to remind you that being eco-conscious is cool. Learning about the environment can be fun, and climate change isn't a dirty phrase. Each week, I'll be getting up close and personal with thought leaders from around the globe as your weekly dose of motivation so that you can create epic change in your own life and become the best version of yourself possible. Are you ready to dive? So, you want to get into the world of ocean conservation, but you're sure that you have to go back to school to get a new degree or new certification before you can start, right? And you can't even think about starting that life-changing journey until you've got them. Well, let me ease your mind. If you've got the desire, a passion for the ocean, and you're willing to put in the work to learn, Eco-Conscious Diver has the course for you. It's a brand new online course titled A Complete Introduction to Marine Conservation. This will help you start a journey that won't just change your straw preference. It could change your life too. I know what you're bringing to the table is so needed in the world of marine conservation, and I can't wait to see you in the course. Head to www.eco-consciousdiver.com to sign up and to check out all other podcast episodes, resources, and the Eco Dive Shop. This episode is packed with insight into creating a career based on passion, diving, and science. I hope you'll enjoy this podcast with John Dietrich from Coral Restoration Foundation. Hey, JD, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, Caitlin?
I'm good. It's so good to have you here. It's been a while since I've talked to you. So we'll jump straight into the intro question, which is, what is your favorite marine species and why?
Cool. Yeah, definitely. So anyone who has ever gone diving with me knows this answer. I have this insane obsession with octopus. I don't really know where it came from, but they're weird. They're just these weird little soft-bodied creatures who can change color and do their own thing. But I don't know what it is about them, but every single time I see them, I just stop what I'm doing, focus solely on them, and my dive buddy literally has to come and pull me by the fin tip away from them. I just think they are just these super smart and alien-like animals that I mean, I can't even put it into words. They just amaze me.
I know too. I really love how smart they are. And I feel like I could just watch the videos on YouTube of people handing things to them and what they do. And their escapes and all this stuff that they do. It's so interesting. It's totally different than any other creature.
Oh my God. When I'm bored on days off, I sit on YouTube and watch octopus videos.
That's awesome. So I obviously know your story. A little background here. We volunteer together at CRF, Coral Restoration Foundation. And JD has had a lot of experience with coral. We call him the Coral Queen. And so I really just want to hear about how you got here and your journey.
Yeah, definitely. So growing up, I've always been a huge ocean nerd. The running joke in my family, and it's still true to this day, if there is nothing related to the ocean on a family vacation, you literally have to force me onto that plane. We have an upcoming trip to Hawaii, and I made my family schedule the entire trip so I could go on a night dive with mantas. I refused it growing up. If there wasn't an aquarium, if there wasn't a beach, I was like, Mom, why are we going? And she's like, come on, it's a family trip. And I'm like, but there's no ocean, there's no sharks, there's no coral, there's nothing. And I was very fortunate to have a family who realized my passion at such a young age and wanted to help me foster that and continue that as I developed. So our family trips became aquarium trips. And instead of reading, your typical books as a kid, my mom and my family would buy all these documentaries and all these things about sharks in the ocean. And I would literally just sit there and be that weird kid in the corner who always had a shark book or an ocean book. And I would talk to teachers and I would talk to my friends and they'd be like, we get it, JD. You like the ocean. Like, cool, move on, please. And I never did. And I'm so happy that I never gave up on it. I went to school up at the University of New England, which is located in Biddeford, Maine. And as anyone who's kind of interested in this field knows, there's really a lot behind it. And it's really hard to kind of narrow down on one subset of the field itself. So I originally picked my school because they had this absolutely amazing marine mammal rehabilitation facility on site. And I was like, that's kind of cool. I guess I'll try that. I don't really have anything else that I know I want to do. So let's take a stab at it. But unfortunately, they decided to cut that program and they decided to reallocate those facilities for a variety of other departments, learning a variety of different things with like aquaponics and different husbandry, which is still really amazing. But for me, I kind of sat there and was like, what am I doing? Like, that's the only thing I really wanted to do in my life. And I'm still super into marine science and it's such a cool field, but I'm sitting in these classes and, I know I'm a freshman at the time, but graduation is looming over me already. And like, I need to have a job. I need to have my life figured out. And I really spent a lot of my time in college unsure of what I was going to do. And I actually was dreading graduation because I knew everyone would be posting things on social media and how our generation is. And I was going to be like, I'm going to work in retail, ? Like, I don't really know what's going on. So fast forward to my junior year of college, and I had a few extra spare credits. And I was looking for some of those miscellaneous electives just to kind of fill my time. And I didn't want to take anything that was, quote unquote, boring. And one of my really good friends told me about a coral biology course that had the lab aspect actually travel down to Ambergris Caye and work out on the Mesoamerican barrier reef.
Wow.
And me being me, living in Maine and having this trip take place over winter break, I was like, well, I'm just going to go. I'm going to suffer through this class that I really don't have any interest in, but I'm going to go to Belize and like post, pictures on Instagram and be like, hey, I hope everyone back home is having fun, like in the snow. Here I am drinking like a Mai Tai or whatever on the beach and like snorkeling and seeing all these really cool reefs. And I remember I walked into class on the very first day and I sat all the way in the back. And I kind of was like that student where I was like, I'm just going to sit here. I don't care. I'm going to pass by. I'm going to get my C for my degree and just move on in life. And I remember my professor, Dr. Jerry Fox, literally opened her mouth and said like 3 words. And I was like, oh my God. And I literally, and I'm not joking, picked up all my stuff and walked to the front of the classroom. And I don't know if it was like a combination of her teaching style or even just the topic itself. But I was like, whoa, these are really, really cool. And I know that's something that like you and I have talked a lot about during our time together, is just the fascination that these reefs can kind of cast over you as a human being. So I took my time in that class and, was like, wow, I care about this. Let me learn everything. And then I would leave class. And instead of like an OChem class or biochem or whatever, I would actually look forward to the homework assignments and look forward to the different things that challenged me to learn the different things about these reefs, whether it was the overall zonation of them, the different species, the different roles they play, and then also looking at the various stressors that our reefs face. And coming up to the trip, I was losing my mind. And I remember people on the flight down were talking and they were like, oh, we're going to see turtles and oh, we're going to see sharks and oh, we're going to see, whatever else you normally see on a reef. And there was just me being that like weird coral nerd that I still am today, who was like, I get to see coral. And everyone was kind of like, JD, we're on this trip to go see stuff. Like, who cares about coral? And I was like, I do. Like, guys, come on, this stuff is so cool. And I remember we spent, I think it was roughly a week out on the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef, and everyone was chasing after all those sharks and those rays and taking all those pictures. And then it was like me, the weird kid, in the back, and I would like duck dive down with my snorkel on and basically hold my breath for as humanly long as I could to just go and stare at those polyps, and like getting up close and personal with the colonies and just being like, whoa, these are so cool. Like, they're these crazy little critters that no one knows about, and they're not this rock. They're an animal, and they're alive, and they have all these super important roles that they play for us. And during that trip, I not only really discovered my passion for coral, but I also discovered my desire to become scuba certified, because I had thought about it before. I'd seen people in aquariums cleaning the tanks and feeding the animals, and, you know, seen pictures for vacation destinations and everything along the line, but I never had that set interest in it. And then when it came to the moment that we saw divers out on the reef in Belize who were able to spend 60 minutes underwater staring at coral polyps, where I could spend less than 60 seconds doing that exact same thing, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to do it. That's so cool. Like, let's do it. Yes, yes, yes. So I remember my mom picked me up from the airport, and before she could even ask about the trip, I was like, we need to find a scuba shop in New Jersey, and I want to get certified. So we can kind of like flash forward a little bit, and I got my open water, was super into it, was into coral, but didn't really know much about it still. I obviously had my education, but I was kind of at a surface level. I wasn't, 100 feet underwater like I am today now. And I decided to do my checkout dives for my open water down in Florida, because I was like, I don't want to go diving in New Jersey. I'm going to be, your spoiled Caribbean diver, and I'm just going to just dive in these beautiful, pristine places. And I remember thinking of the reefs in Belize, and they were, these aquaporids, these dendrogyras, these pseudodiplorias, and all those other fancy scientific names, and they were big and they were healthy. And I was so freaking pumped to go back to Florida, because I was like, I'm going to see all of those corals again, and it's going to be this vibrant picture underwater. And I remember we got down there, we flew down and then drove to like the dive site, and I back rolled off the boat, and I opened my eyes, and it was just this graveyard. And I'm not trying to exaggerate, I was crying. And I remember my dive instructor was like, what is wrong with this kid? Like, is he okay? Like, giving me the okay sign. And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. And like, I did my skills and stuff, and I remember just swimming around, and I was like, I don't want to dive on this. All of this is dead. This is insane. And really, in that moment, I was like, something is wrong. Our reefs are dying. This is something that I would love to see again, and it's not here. This is not how it should be. And that's really what got me into the fields of conservation, and actually deciding to take that next big step, to choose those career paths and to make those ultimately life-changing decisions. So I spent a bit of time back up in Maine, and I was, of course, very far from all of my coral reefs, and I was very upset and very sad and very mopey. And I was looking to kind of make a difference again. And I ultimately stumbled upon a organization named Global Visions International. They are this multidisciplinary organization that's spread throughout the world that focuses on pretty much anything you can imagine. And I remember I Googled coral restoration internships, and they were one of the first ones to pop up. And I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. I'm going to go to Mexico, and I'm going to study these reefs, and blah, 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 blah. I'm going to be a scientist. So I packed all my bags. I moved to Mexico, and those 2 months arguably changed my life. I was working on a remote dive base. I was based on the Yucatan. I was in the Shan Khan Biosphere Reserve, which is roughly an hour and a half south of Tulum. We were in a remote base, like no running water, no electricity, no air conditioning, no Wi-Fi, no showers, nothing. And people came and they were like, oh my God, why am I here? And then meanwhile, me being that weird person I am, I was like, this is amazing. I don't have to talk to anyone. Like we have to make these genuine connections with one another and not be on our phones and not be distracted by all the other things that happen in life. And by having these direct connections with my fellow individuals who were so focused on reefs, we had these thorough and in-depth conversations about what they saw and what their emotions were and how they're trying to make a difference. And then we were putting that on top of going out and surveying reefs and seeing reefs that were great and healthy and having huge thickets of your staghorn and your elkhorn, and then other sites that were dead and decimated, and reporting all of this data and actually making something of your dive and not just doing your typical recreational approach. And it just kind of hooked me and I loved it. And just being able to collect that information and send it off, and at the end of the day, sit down and reflect on everything and just be like, cool, I'm doing something. It may just be that one human being doing it, but it's better than no one doing it. Mm-hmm. And it kind of was like this addiction isn't the best word, but just this crazed obsession over coral conservation. And again, that was my summer after my junior year. So I still had senior year, and I went back up and of course, again, was back away from all of these corals and was super sad and super bummed again. And one of my really good friends just happened to tell me about the Coral Restoration Foundation. And admittedly, I don't really know how the other internship had popped up above CRF in my search, but I had no idea who they were. And honestly speaking, after reading the internship, I was like, I'm not qualified for this. Like, I'm not going to try. But then I was like, you know what? It can't hurt. I want to have something to post about after graduation. So let me send over an application. And to my absolute surprise, I got a response back from the education head, Derek Hagan. And he was like, we'd love to schedule an interview with you. And I kind of was like, what? Like, this can't be real. Like, someone pinched me. And I had the interview. It went great. They offered me a position. And unfortunately, due to my college graduation time, I had to pick either between starting the internship or graduating college. And that was a very tricky conversation to have with my family and with my friends. And I ultimately decided graduation. You only graduate college once, so let me focus on that. And then I decided to reapply. And I again was like, okay, I'm going to reapply. I don't really know if I'm going to get it. And lo and behold, I got that acceptance. So it's kind of like this running theme of me just moving from one place to the other and never settling somewhere. And I moved down to the Keys and I was working for CRF as an intern. And I spent a year with them, and it was arguably another amazing year of my life. Working, and I say working in reference to interning, it's just kind of this weird tick that I have. Working for the largest coral restoration nonprofit really galvanized my career in this field. I learned so many different things that are encompassing the field of restoration, because it truly is a multidisciplinary approach that we take here as an organization. We focus on things like that of development and communications. And we also have, you know, your restoration, your science, your education, but it's this beautiful medley of everything. And it really caused me to grow, not only as a diver, as a restoration practitioner, but also just as a human being. The internship really challenged me in things that I struggled. I was a horrible presenter before I went to CRF. I was terrified of presenting one-on-one. Like something like this before my time as an intern would not have happened. You would have emailed me and been like, hey, JD, you want to do this? And I'd be like, whoop, in the trash it goes. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
No, but you say that, but I feel like, so I was there one of the first times that you did one of the education things on your own, and you did such a good job. I think it's all in your head. You were made for this.
But again, just that year-long period just had so much personal development. And I was working alongside these big names in restoration that were just teaching me more than I really ever thought possible. And with the internship itself, it's a a tiered internship. So you kind of focus as a first round intern, you're learning everything about the nonprofit. And then you work to be a lead and you get to kind of specialize in, leading those first round interns. And then your third semester is a program intern. And with me picking a program, which is again, that one of those many departments that encompasses CRF as an organization, I had no clue. Just kind of like that whole theme of me in college being like, well, what am I doing? And I wanted to do restoration. I wanted to do education. I wanted to do science. But I felt if I had picked one, I would be missing out on the others. And that's where the fourth option of dive programs had, quote unquote, entered the chat. They are this medley of restoration, science, and education, and they make you bring people who may have no clue who we are as an organization or what coral is, and you bring them in, you teach them in the morning, and then you actually get to bring them out in the afternoon and have them see those nurseries, have them perform nursery maintenance, have them outplant coral, have them monitor coral, and actually realize the galvanizing force that these citizen science programs can have. And again, one of the biggest things that CRF always talks about is the fact that we need this large scale, massive action to help restore our reefs, both down here in Florida, but also on this global level. We as an organization can't do that alone. We have to have every single human being on this planet realizing the impacts that we have on our reefs and realizing the importance that these reefs play for every single human being and making sure that they get actively involved. But we can touch more upon that in a little bit. But yeah, then my internship ended. And the really big ideology behind that internship, and this is going to be kind of tacky, is to have our interns get outplanted onto a different reef. We like to see our interns come in, learn our methodology, learn what we do, learn the various aspects that make up our organization, and then bring them to a new reef, bring them somewhere else, bring those ideas, bring that methodology to allow that further discussion and to help, again, restore a reef, whether they're somewhere down here in Florida, if they go to Australia, if they go to Fiji, Thailand, wherever it may be, so they can continue to challenge these issues that our reefs are facing. So that's what I wound up doing. I spent a bit of time kind of unemployed because getting a job in this field is arguably the hardest thing that I have done in my life. And I ultimately stumbled upon a job opportunity that was based out of Costa Rica. Their requirements were that of a dive instructor. And at the time I was only a DM. And I sat there and kind of had this back and forth argument with myself. And I was like, I'm not qualified. I shouldn't apply. But then I was like, you know what? Maybe I should apply. You never know what can happen. And one of the biggest things that I always tell people now is even if you're not qualified for the job, still send over that resume, send over that cover letter, because you never know what those individuals who are trying to hire someone have on the back burner. And maybe they'll make an exception. And ultimately, that's what happens with me. They saw the experience that I had with CRF, with Global Visions International, with my experience in marine science as a college graduate. And they were like, you're not an instructor, but the opportunity itself is based out of a dive shop. So we'll give you your instructor if you come down here and you teach a variety of marine conservation related specialties.
That's a good deal too.
When they were like, we'll pay for your instructor, well, the majority of it, I was like, okay, I'm packing my bags. Like, when do I come?
Yeah, seriously. I feel like I gave my firstborn child to get my instructor.
Yeah, totally.
So expensive.
So again, this running theme of me kind of bouncing around, from, New Jersey, where I'm from, to Maine, to Mexico, back to Maine, to Florida, back to New Jersey, and then now Costa Rica. It's like this crazy path. But I moved to Costa Rica. This gringo who speaks no Spanish packed 2 bags my entire life and was set to live in Costa Rica for the foreseeable future. I had a twofold position for the organization that I was working for. I was the primary marine conservation instructor for Oceans Unlimited and GoPro, which is based out of Quepos in Costa Rica. It's on the Pacific coast. So I worked on teaching a variety of different ocean and marine conservation specialties. So I taught things like octopus ecology, nudibranch ecology, marine conservation research diver, project-aware shark, sponge ecology, just to kind of bring in primarily the students that we were having do their DM or just, open water advanced about the importance of our oceans, because we as divers have this innate responsibility to take care of the places that we go diving. And if you give these individuals that knowledge to not only realize the importance of these ecosystems, but also just the importance that we play as the stewards for these ecosystems, you can again bring in that large scale massive action. And we had students from Europe, from America, from Latin America, from Australia, and taking that simple moment to teach them in a day or a couple days about the importance, and then they leave and go back home, creates these ambassadors for our oceans. And then on top of that, the dive shop had two women, Georgia King and Catherine Evans, who worked together to found a coral restoration nonprofit. That was named Marine Conservation Costa Rica. It was founded in April of 2019. 2020, apologies. And maybe it was 2019. My dates are all over the place. It was 2019, and then I went in November of 2019. So it was still a pretty new organization, but that also was amazing because I got to act as an assistant coral program manager. And with that, it was just trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And coming from the Atlantic to the Pacific was insane because the Pacific is a totally different monster. There's more current, there's more surge, there's more swell, visibility isn't as high. So working within that restoration nonprofit and figuring out, okay, what can I take from what I've learned at CRF and help apply that here? And getting to face these new challenges was really exciting, but also sometimes disheartening. And that's another really big thing that we can touch upon within restoration is sometimes things don't go as planned. I was actually tasked with running the nonprofit for a short period of time. And as much as it pains me to say, I set up nurseries and then I came back and they were gone. Like the surge would come through and take it, the corals would be gone. And as much as that upset me and I felt horrible and it still kills me to this day, it challenges you to think further and to make sure that you plan accordingly, you make those adjustments, and you think about where you're putting these restoration efforts into place. And then as we progressed further and further and we expanded our stock, I actually was able to help them outplant for the first time, which is really cool. So we worked with Pastillipora, we worked with Parietes, and we worked with Pavona, which are kind of like the stony corals of the Pacific. And right before I left Costa Rica, I actually helped them outplant for the first time. So that's an amazing feeling. And I'm very upset that I'm no longer in Costa Rica, but knowing that I was able to contribute some of my methodology and knowledge to this nonprofit is arguably this amazing feeling. And I'm so proud to constantly see updates from Marine Conservation Costa Rica and see them further outplanting and making more nurseries and just continuing to educate people in Costa Rica, but also people who visit the country itself, the importance of these reefs. And I obviously mentioned that I am no longer there, and that kind of ties into current situations. With the pandemic and with COVID-19, I unfortunately had to, quote unquote, flee the country. Everything within Costa Rica shut down. And with me not being a citizen, I ultimately made the decision that I should return to my home country just to be safe. And my circumstance and my situation right now kind of all comes down to luck. So the day or so after I got back from Costa Rica, one of my previous bosses actually saw that I had made a post about being back in the States. And obviously me being me and being an oversharer, had this whole sappy post on Facebook talking about having to leave Costa Rica and not sure when I can return. And they were like, hey, we have an opening coming up at CRF. Like, the education department head always looks out for the previous interns and makes sure that we, continue to go forward and find jobs in this field. So he was like, if you want, there's an opportunity. You should send over a resume. And again, with CRF kind of having this methodology of outplanting on different reefs from a, intern passing on standpoint, I was like, I'll send over a resume, but this is me being that broken record. I'm probably not going to get it because there are probably individuals who are highly more qualified or whatever you want to say. But here I am. So I quickly found out that I had been offered the job, and having such a natural love for CRF and the work that we do as an organization, I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I will happily move back to the Keys. And I started down here in April. So I am CRF's new volunteer coordinator. So I'm working with further expanding the program itself, making sure that our current volunteers love the program, because again, we can't accomplish our work without our volunteer basis. I believe some numbers, like roughly 70% of all of the restoration work that we do comes from our volunteer and our intern program. So these individuals truly do play a strong role in our work as a nonprofit restoration organization. And I honestly could not be happier just being back down here in the Keys and continuing to work for an organization that I not only love, but that actively makes a difference is something I honestly would not trade for the world. But I know that was a long tangent, but in summary, that is my experience and course of action to get where I am today.
That's such an awesome story. And really, all the places that you've been, it all brought you to where you are now. I mean, your time in Costa Rica, I'm sure, played a huge role in you coming back to CRF. And I think you're perfect for the volunteer coordinator position. It's so awesome. So I do have a question. Just for the listeners who don't know that much about coral reefs, what do you think are the biggest threats to coral reefs in the Keys at this time?
That can kind of be clumped into like a multitude of different things. First and foremost, I would just say, and this is me speaking as myself, just humans in general. We as human beings sometimes don't realize the overall impact that we have as these smart thinking organisms. That's a very weird description of human beings. But a lot of times snorkelers and divers, as we are the stewards for these ecosystems, can also have a great level of impact in terms of a negative sphere. If you're a snorkeler and you're chasing after animals and you're trying to get that selfie for Instagram, and you don't realize that corals are these super slow growing organisms, and you get tired and think, hey, that's a cool rock, I'm going to stand on it to rest. You can step on it, break it off, it falls in the sand, it gets rolled around, it gets smothered, it gets killed, and that's honestly not the best thing. Similarly, I know I'm plenty guilty of it. When you're out diving, you may not realize where your fin tips are or where some of your gear is, and you kick the reef, you crash into it, you drag your SPG over top. And while you may think, okay, it's just one diver, but again, if you're on a popular reef site and that has hundreds upon thousands of divers every single week, month, year, so on and so forth, that adds up over a period of time and can really degrade those reef systems. And I would say probably the other really big one is the issue of climate change. We have to look into the fact that we are causing our oceans to warm at an exceedingly fast rate. And granted, climate change does happen on small scales over a period of time. We do know that. But again, we're making it happen way too fast. So when those waters get way too warm, the photosynthetic dinoflagellate that lives within coral tissue, which is known as zooxanthellae, zooxanthellae, zoox, however you want to say it. That way I don't get roasted by a bunch of high-end science coral biologists. They stop working. So basically what that means is that coral recognizes there is something inside its tissues that is not doing its job, and it gets stressed out and it expels those zooxanthellae. And that's the overall process known as coral bleaching. Now with that zooxanthellae not only gives coral the color that we love to see when we're diving, but also gives it roughly 90% of the energy that coral needs to survive. So you can imagine bleached coral isn't dead coral, but it's more likely to die. Because if you are, as a human being, someone who has a cold and you aren't able to get medicine for that, you may not die right then and there, but if you are exposed over a long period of time, you are more likely to die. And that's basically the exact same thing that's happening to our reefs. And it's really upsetting to see that firsthand. I know some of the coral that I first saw when I started to dive in Costa Rica was beautiful and was healthy. And then you would go out for another dive a couple days later, a couple weeks later, and see that exact same colony, just this stark white. And I always feel like Chasing Coral is a great documentary about the overall process of what's happening to our reefs. And I know in that they always talk about the coral that is fluorescing and kind of yelling for help. It's basically saying, notice me, see me, like do something. And I never really felt that before, but then going in and seeing that stark white across that kind of, typical ocean background was like, oh my God, it's there. It wants to be noticed. And then you come back again another week or two and you see now it's dead and it's covered in this algae. Is just this really disheartening fact. And again, something that people need to be able to see firsthand. And that's one of the biggest challenges I think that we face in the future of our reefs.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. I mean, I think just the lack of knowledge that a lot of people who haven't been around corals or heard about this have. I remember at Lukey Reef Resort when I worked there, a lot of times, corals bleach neon, so some of them will bleach like a bright purple color. And we would always have people come up and they'd be like, oh, what are those purple corals? They're bright purple and they're so beautiful. And we're like, well, actually, they're bleached. And then we take them through the whole thing. They're like, wow, I had no idea, and we also had people standing on the corals, waving at people, and, and it's crazy, but, they don't know any better. And so that's, part of, I guess, the whole discussion is like, how do we get that education to people?
Yeah. So again, it's just trying to raise awareness, but doing it in a way that's not confrontational. One of the biggest moments that has stuck out to me during my time down here in the Keys is going out just for typical recreational fun dives, taking a break from the restoration work and just making sure I'm still going out and enjoying diving itself. And I remember someone on the boat that I was with, we popped up and they were like, wow, that reef is gorgeous. That reef is beautiful. And for those who don't know, we're basically sitting with 97% of our once dominant elkhorn and staghorn aquaporid corals are now gone down here in the Keys. And I approached them and I was like, hey, insert factoids here. And it was not in a very combative way, but instantly the person got very defensive. And through like a very open and honest, but also non-confrontational or combative way, we wound up having this very educated and laid back conversation. And instead of just jumping to these instant conclusions about someone, taking the time to have that conversation, I think is really one of the biggest things that everyone needs to do. And again, we really can't save our reefs if we don't share the word. So whatever way possible, whether it's through social media, whether it's through me harassing my family and friends about reefs and telling them about it, whether it's someone coming down and partaking in, a recreational dive program with CRF or volunteering or even doing an internship and just seeing firsthand. But we have to find creative and engaging ways to help teach people and see firsthand what's going on. Because when you come down to the Keys, and if you're not a diver and you're not going underwater, you look out at that beautiful blue and you're like, wow, it's super healthy. And unless people see that firsthand, they really aren't going to know what's going on. And they're also not going to care. So we need to find ways to constantly inspire individuals to take action and ways to make them care about these ecosystems.
Yeah, yeah. And I think just the point of, as dive professionals and people in general, just going at it from like an understanding
Yeah.
viewpoint. Because I've definitely heard dive professionals kind of scold people on boats and stuff, and it just sort of makes them not want to listen, you
Yeah.
know?
It's almost
Um,
like close up like a clam.
yeah, it's like, I mean, I came from a small city in Texas where I would say the majority of people don't know anything about any of this stuff. And I know that I didn't, so just remembering that, as we're teaching people, like they're having that aha moment like we had not that long ago,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think like one of the other really big things to mention is the impact that your voice can have. Like I know sometimes with me, even before my time in this field, I was always like, oh, I'm just one human being. Like growing up and hearing about climate change and hearing about pollution, I've always just been like, I'm just one person. I can't make a difference. And I think there really needs to be this shift away from that mindset. Because even if you look at my professor in college, she is one human being. She has one voice and she can talk about coral all she wants. But by her teaching that course and having me in that course, I am now working for with the world's largest coral restoration nonprofit organization. And like that speaks volumes to the overall impact that you as one human being can do. And if I like even you talking about Texas, me coming back home to New Jersey where there are no reefs. I've had my mom now like tell me that she sits at like work lunch with her coworkers and talks about reefs, or she has like a picture of me on her desk in like a scuba kit, and her patients come in and talk to her, and she talks to them and educates them on the importance of the reef. So it's just crazy to see that you may just be that one human being, but your voice can make a difference. So like, don't be discouraged to try, because at the end of the day, even if you're trying and it maybe doesn't go anywhere, you're still doing something, and it's more than what you were doing the day before.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you say one of your professors had that effect on you because mine did too, was Dr.
Okay.
Wilkie, who a lot of people in the dive industry know. And I actually got to have him on my podcast to talk about all the stuff that he did.
Oh,
like
awesome.
all kind of came full circle. It was really cool. So another question I have is just explaining why I know that there's a million reasons that coral reefs are important, but if you were just to briefly explain why coral reefs are so important, what would you say?
Yeah. I would probably go with just the overall level of interconnectivity that these reefs have. There is a beautiful image done by the Nature Conservancy. I wish I knew what you could Google search to have it pop up. So my apologies, but it basically compares and contrasts a healthy reef versus a degraded reef. So when you look at a healthy reef, you have all of that structure, right? There's all that rugosity that contributes, and there's all that 3D space. With that 3D space, you have space for small little animals to live in. With the small animals, you get the medium animals. With the medium animals, you get the big animals. And then you can get your charismatic megafauna, like your sharks, your rays, your turtles, everything along those lines. With that charismatic megafauna, you have people who want to come see it. We're talking about like our divers and our snorkelers. So let's say someone like me who wants to come down to, hypothetically, Florida to come see that. So I pay for an Uber to get to the airport. I pay for my ticket. I pay for another Uber to get from Miami down to the Keys. I pay for my hotel. I pay the dive shop for my ability to go out and go diving. And I also pay for all the restaurants, all the stupid souvenirs I'm probably going to buy, all the bars I'll go to, everything. And all of that ties back to me wanting to see the reef. Other things you can look at is with that healthy reef ecosystem, you have a breaker for your waves and for your storm surge. So when you have hurricanes pass over it, reefs are great at actually buffering that wave energy. And they're not going to stop the entire storm surge, but they make it much smaller. So it's not going to be as much coastal flooding when you have a huge hurricane come through. And then you can also just look at the fact that in those sustainable, healthy ecosystems with all of those fish, you have a bunch of other individuals who are going out, who are hopefully sustainably fishing, but they're still having that industry behind them. So again, coming back to that idea of supporting jobs, but then also having food for people to eat. Because if you don't have that reef, you don't have those fish, those people don't have jobs, or those dive industry individuals don't have jobs. And then again, when you go to a restaurant and you want to order something, there's nothing there for you to eat. So most people don't realize the overall interconnectivity that these reefs play. And again, you may be somewhere in a landlocked state listening to this and be like, okay, well, that example that he's talking about doesn't connect to me. But coming back to something as simple as like a restaurant, if you're in a landlocked state and you want a certain type of fish, I can guarantee you that it is some way connected to a reef. And if we lose our reef, you're going to lose that favorite meal of yours on that plate.
Yeah, and that's such a great way to bring it back. I feel like because it is so hard, to make people that have never seen a coral reef or, never even been on a vacation somewhere to see a coral reef. It's like, how do you bring it back to them and tell them, that what they're doing makes a difference? That's perfect. I love that explanation.
One of like the other really big ones that I always talk about is like the interconnectivity that they have to like other organisms. So like mine's a pretty easy one because like my favorite animal is an octopus, and obviously octopus live on reefs. But let's say like I always try to challenge people to like have me connect it back to a reef one way or another. But if you look at, let's say, like a whale, people will be like, oh, well, whales don't live on reefs. Like, what are you talking about? But you can imagine like some of the food that whale may eat, some of that krill, some of that fish probably has some sort of connection to that reef. So if we lose that reef, those fish or that krill is gone. I'm losing my voice, apologies. And then that whale doesn't have anything to eat. So again, you can have shifting locations of that and you won't see it as much, or potentially that animal, that whale, whatever it may be, could also go extinct. So even if it's not directly impacting humans who maybe, again, are somewhere that doesn't have a reef, it's still impacting their life in one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say are the best ways for everyone to make changes in their everyday lives to help protect coral reefs, like no matter where they are?
I honestly would just say, just try to become more eco-conscious. You do not have to pick up and leave your entire life in the middle of a landlocked state and travel down here and come intern with us to make a difference. That's obviously one of the many options that you can do, but just becoming more conscious, whether that's, trying to reduce your plastic, whether you're going to cut out meat on a Monday and do meatless Monday, doing public transit or walking to work if you can, just small little actions. And that always ties back to that whole ideology that we were talking about before, with you being like, oh, well, I'm just one person. So if I, walk to work, it's not going to make that big of a difference. But if, let's say, everyone in whatever landlocked state you're in decides to walk or bike to work, all those carbon emissions will drastically drop. So again, it doesn't have to be this grandiose action. Small actions are better than nothing. And that, again, will have that direct interconnectivity with our reefs and still do something to help preserve them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I think it's so many people get caught up on the fact that it's like so overwhelming to make all of these changes. Maybe it's that you live somewhere where your work is too far for you to walk. So instead you get a hybrid.
Yeah.
But it's just all these little things that add up. If everyone got a hybrid, then we'd be in better shape.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know with me, some of the things I struggle with is like reducing plastic usage. Like I know I have like all my reusable cups, I have all my reusable like Ziploc bags and stuff. But then like you go to the grocery store, and if you're not somewhere that has like super eco-friendly options, you like go to buy chicken or vegetables or whatever, and it's still in plastic. Mm-hmm. And like, yeah, you're still generating plastic and still having some form of waste. But now instead of you, being at 100% plastic free, maybe you're at 50 or 60 or 30 or whatever. It's still, again, like you were just saying, doing something.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, CRF is a huge part of this conversation. So I want to ask now, is there anything upcoming that you want to promote for CRF? I know you guys always have events and all sorts of stuff.
So with COVID, things are obviously a little bit unique, as it is for everyone here. Well, not even here, just around the world. So at this very moment, not off the top of my head, I wish I had more for you. We are obviously trying to get things back up and running. We're staying within the various CDC recommendations. We're obviously all wearing our masks and all the other social distancing parameters. But my biggest thing to promote is just our website, I guess. Go on over to www.coralrestoration.org. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And the moment we have updates in regards to volunteering, in regards to other huge events like maybe our gala, Coralpalooza, and other events along those lines will all be there. Again, I wish I had more to push out and more to share, but it's, again, kind of a very unique situation for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that nonprofits have really taken a hit just with everyone's, income dropping. It's kind of one of the first things that people cut. So if you do have extra money to donate, CRF is definitely a worthy cause. And if not, you can always follow their social media and share the stuff that they do. That's a great way to help nonprofits, is just to share, because people in your audience may have never seen it before. So.
Exactly. And I will do one last shameless plug. As the volunteer coordinator, if anyone has any interest in getting involved with us as a volunteer, all of our information can be found online. And at the bottom of the volunteer tab, there is a little survey that you can submit to kind of start the overall process. And for anyone who does that, you'll be dealing with me. So I look forward to anyone who possibly submits. And then if you read that site and you still have some questions, my email is just jd@coralrestoration.org. So if you have some more in-depth questions, comments, concerns about the volunteer program, I'm always happy to answer them.
Yes, and it's so much fun, you guys. I literally have a blast every time. And I'm so excited to get started working with you guys again, because I am moving to Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so hopefully August, September timeframe. So I'll definitely be there working with CRF again. I'm really excited about that. And hang out with the Coral Queens.
We love our volunteers very much, and we look forward to hopefully seeing them very soon.
Awesome. All right. Well, I hope I get to speak with you again soon about everything that you're doing. It seems like you've always got awesome stuff going on. And so that's a wrap. Thank you so much, JD.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for having me. It was great getting to talk to you again.
You too. All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye, Caitlin.
I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast and learned some valuable information about the journey of conservation. This is a constant process of learning, growth, and understanding, so I look forward to chatting with JD again. Please leave a review if you can, and go to www.eco-consciousdiver.com to check out all other podcasts, resources, and everything we've got going on there. See you next week.